Request to a Year by Judith Wright features a dramatic moment of near tragedy. More importantly, it is about fortitude and stoicism as valuable character traits. In particular, it's about how strong women can be, as historically they've had to be. We hear the poetic voice reflect upon the aspects of her great-great-grandmother's personality that she would like to have inherited. She tells a family anecdote about her ancestor watching her son in a very precarious situation and being unable to help him. Nevertheless, she keeps calm and sketches the scene as it unfolds, and the picture, and therefore the story, still survive. This raises the idea of the importance of art and perspective in the poem. There are several key themes in the poem, such as stoicism or fortitude in the face of adversity, the role of women in 19th century society, female strength, the importance of art, the role of the family, the conflict between motherhood and art, or even motherhood and work, memory, and inheritance. I'll tell you a bit about the poet. Australian-born Judith Wright was an author, poet, environmentalist, and social activist. She must have known a bit about the need for fortitude, as she had a tough life. Her mother passed away when she was young, and she was brought up by an aunt and sent to boarding school. Later she married and had a daughter, but her husband died young, only 4 years into their marriage. In 1991 she received the Queen's Gold Medal for Poetry. Request to a Year is from her 9th collection of poetry, which was published in 1955. Hughes Deith from the University of Western Australia called Wright a master of devastating understatement. She writes aphoristically, but often you do not notice the aphorisms because they spill out gently. So look out for the gentle political points or social exposés that she raises in this work. Request to a Year. If the year is meditating a suitable gift, I should like it to be the attitude of my great-great-grandmother, legendary devotee of the arts, who, having 8 children and little opportunity for painting pictures, sat one day on a high rock beside a river in Switzerland, and from a difficult distance viewed her second son, balanced on a small ice floe, drift down the current towards the waterfall that struck rock bottom 80 feet below, while her second daughter, impeded no doubt by the petticoats of the day, stretched out a last hope alpenstock, which luckily later caught him on his way. Nothing, it was evident, could be done, and with the artist's isolating eye, my great-great-grandmother hastily sketched the scene. The sketch survives to prove the story by. Year, if you have no Mother's Day present planned, reach back and bring me the firmness of her hand. The title, Request to a Year, brings to mind the idea of a New Year's resolution, which often focuses on what we want to get out of a year. Normally when we make a New Year's resolution, this is to toughen up and have some resolve about something, to lose weight, stop drinking, exercise more, etc. Similarly, this poem is about developing one's character. The poem starts in the conditional tense, if the year is meditating. By personifying the year as meditative or thoughtful and able to delegate a gift, we immediately reflect on what the narrator wants to achieve. And that, as illustrated in the main body of the poem through an anecdote, is remarkable strength of character. Of course, the title is figurative language. The year isn't going to directly give her anything at all, but a year is a period of time during which the narrator could work on herself. And what a gift it would be to have the attitude of the great-great-grandmother. The speaker's great-great-grandmother is described as a legendary devotee of the arts, potentially suggesting that she has achieved notoriety outside the family too in creative circles. The noun devotee indicates her passion and commitment to the arts. This poem was published in 1955, so presumably the great-great-grandmother of the poem, who's based on Wright's real-life ancestor, lived about a century or so before that, and yet her memory has been kept alive in the art that she created. Furthermore, the story that the painting told has been passed down the family as a memory, and indeed continues to live through the art form that is this poem. Crisp consonants in meditating a suitable gift, combined with the use of the conditional tense, I should like it to be, creates a very polite and measured tone. It evokes a sense of a different, more old-fashioned time and place. We learn that the incident recounted in the poem took place in Switzerland, and we get some indication that the lives of women were much harder in the 19th century than they are now. In the second stanza, another quatrain, the sentence started in stanza 1 continues with a relative clause revealing that the ancestor had 8 children. This was not unusual, as birth control was not readily available in the 19th century, and the infant mortality rate was high. People therefore did not expect all of their children to make it to adulthood. Perhaps the numbering of the children as second son and second daughter reflects this. And because of the great-great-grandmother's large family, she had little opportunity for painting pictures. Life must have been very busy with 8 children to organise. I'm making a meal out of bringing up 2. Notice that the plosive alliteration and hard consonant sounds increase in the second and third stanzas, reinforcing the idea of how tough life was and how little free time women had. So no wonder when you look at great artists of the time, they are often male, and I think Wright is definitely making this socio-political point in her poem. Despite this lack of free time, the anecdote centers around a rare moment when the ancestor is elevated on a rock with her art materials to hand and her children exploring the area around her. Presumably the high rock creates a good vantage point to paint from, but the adjective high could also allude to the ancestor's elevated status in the eyes of the speaker. The adjective also separates her from the near tragedy that is about to play out below. Notice the enjambment into the next stanza, as this very long sentence is spread over 4 stanzas and continues, using several relative clauses, outlining clearly and calmly where and how this incident happened. Despite the calmly recounted facts of the story, the enjambment creates some sense of anticipation and momentum as the incident is described for the reader. From a difficult distance she viewed her second son. The consonants in difficult distance viewed, those hard D sounds, reinforce the harsh reality of the situation. The mother is not in a position to help her child when he is in peril. She is far too far away, and the sibilance in second son on the small ice floe creates a wistful sound or a sense of hopelessness, or perhaps a sinister sense of tension and dread, you decide. Furthermore, the verb balanced makes him sound precarious and vulnerable, as if he could fall to his death at any moment, and he's at the mercy of the current's drift, or drifting down the river. The description of his progress towards the waterfall creates a sense that he's about to face his doom as it struck rock bottom 80 feet below. Notice the harsh consonants here too, which helps us imagine him potentially being smashed to death. But there's a noticeable, perhaps strange sense of detachment in this stanza. The second son is not named, he's 2 out of 8, despite the sense of momentum evoked by the enjambment, illustrating the continuous movement of the son drifting down the river. There is not a tone of panic. The very long, complex sentence continues into the 4th stanza, where the other strong female character of the story, the unnamed second daughter, becomes the heroine of the tale without any fuss or accolade. Despite her 19th century clothes, the petticoats of the day, layer upon layer of material, she is able to reach the river and hold out a walking stick, an alpenstock, for her brother to clutch. Here, the verb choice impeded reminds us of the difficulties that women would have faced in a 19th century patriarchal society, where the expectation was to dress in weighty, cumbersome clothing in order to maintain modesty and dignity. But of course, the consequence of that fashion was discomfort and reduced mobility for women. The phrasing "no doubt impeded by" suggests that women were restricted in many ways in 19th century society, and that this was a given. Notice that the focus in this poem is on the female characters. The great-great-grandmother is admired. The daughter is the hero of the moment. They clearly found themselves in a desperate situation, as indicated by the compound adjective "last hope," to describe the opportunity provided by the alpenstock. However, the fact that the son is saved is mentioned as an aside in parenthesis. We therefore focus on the image of the daughter brandishing a stick instead. She's active and heroic, and perhaps even weaponized, suggesting that women are beginning to bring about change and fight society's restrictions. Remember that in 1832, the Great Reform Act, which gave middle-class men the vote, excluded women from the electorate by defining voters as male persons, and that as a result, the suffragette movement gathered momentum. Women's suffrage was a long, hard, and often violent struggle. It wasn't until 1918 that women over the age of 21 had the vote in Britain. In the penultimate stanza, we learn that the mother did nothing to save her son. The adverb starts the sentence and is emphatic. But her behaviour was not callous, it was stoical. There was nothing that could be done. And as she could not reach him, she paints the scene unfolding, and preserves in art what could have been her son's last moments of life. This potential final chapter in his life story ultimately does survive him. Hastily sketched the scene, and the sketch survives, with its sibilance, evokes the sound of the scratching out of the drawing. I think there's more jubilance in this sibilant phrase, "the sketch survives," than the adverb "luckily the son was caught and saved" at the end of the previous stanza. He lives on in memoriam through the picture which has been passed down the generations, as well as surviving the incident itself. This perhaps suggests that although we cannot necessarily change things through art, it is powerful in some way, as it's able to preserve history and memory and tell a sort of truth. In fact, this poem was published in a collection entitled The Two Fires, and the two fires refer to the atomic bombs dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in the Second World War. We know that Wright was a politically minded person, and that she used her work, her art, to expose what she felt was going on in the world, and in Australia in particular. She fought back against the destruction of the environment, successfully helping to preserve the Great Barrier Reef, and she exposed the atrocious ways in which the Aboriginal peoples were treated by white settlers. In Request to a Year, Wright celebrates the power and importance of art, and gently alludes to the fact that it was created by a woman in a patriarchal society, which was a remarkable feat in itself. In the penultimate and final stanzas, notice the use of synecdoche, I and hand, to refer to the great-great-grandmother and her craft as an artist. The reference to I is interesting, as she is able to keep perspective in both senses of the word. The mother knows she cannot intervene, but is not hysterical. She's stoical, and even from a distance she hastily captures this significant moment in art, showing enormous presence of mind. In the final stanza, a rhyming couplet, the poetic voice addresses the year again by using apostrophe. You may remember this technique from the Thomas Hardy poem He Never Expected Much, Well World, and the implication of the request for stoicism as a Mother's Day present suggests that the great-great-grandmother of the poem was a good mother, exhibited by her ability to accept some things that we cannot change, and that her carrying on and doing something of merit in the face of adversity is admirable. The idiomatic phrase "a firm hand" means to keep control, and that's exactly what the mother does. She is steady, she keeps control of her emotions, and she gets on with her work. Moreover, she creates something worthwhile out of adversity, her painting. Finally, a word on structure. The poem is written in free verse, although there are some examples of alternate lines rhyming. For example, flow, below, and I and by, and there's a neat and satisfying conclusion in the rhyming couplet at the end. You could argue that a rhyme scheme becomes gradually more noticeable as the poem progresses. When the story element is introduced in the poem, the free verse sounds more like prose. But as the poem heads towards its rhyming couplet conclusion, it takes on a more traditionally poetic form. This could reinforce the idea that the tale contained in the painted artwork is taking on a new poetic form in Wright's work. Notice that the conceit of the first and last stanzas, portraying the year as a potential benefactor, allows the poetic voice to wonder what the year might bring her and ultimately convey her hope to become a woman of substance. It creates a framing device for the main body of the poem, the anecdote. And in summary, that story outlines a significant event from the narrator's family history, which was met with fortitude on the part of the mother, heroic quick thinking on the part of the daughter, and admiration on the part of the poetic voice. And of course, the poet has created her own art. This contemplation on the incident recorded in the painting has become poetry. So Request to a Year is very much a celebration of womanhood and female artistry too. Thank you very much for listening, and please do take a moment to like and share.